I'd like to call the Chickasha City Council meeting to order, please. Can I get a roll call?
Boyd.
Here.
Nelson.
Here.
Ginn. Here. Ebelthwaite. Here. Smith.
Present.
Alexander. Here. Burris.
Here.
Gertis.
Here.
Grayson.
Here. We'll have a prayer by Georgianne and a pledge by Kia.
Please bow your head with me. Heavenly Father, we ask that you guide our hearts and mind tonight as we gather here in this chamber to conduct the business of the city. We ask that you continue to watch over our employees and their daily duties for the city and return them home each and every day and after shift to their loved ones and their family. We'd also ask that you watch over our military, both here and abroad, in these trying times. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Susan, do we have any citizen comments?
No, sir.
Item 3, council communications.
I'll start.
Yeah.
16th and Grand. We have to get that intersection striped. I mean, we've been talking about it for a while, ever since I've been on the council, and we've got to get it done. I about got hit head on. And pulling in from the south on 16th Street to make a left-hand turn, at the same time, the signal was on for traffic to come off of Grand Avenue, turning down 6th Street, and you can't see the lanes, you don't know where to turn, and he about got me. So we've got to get that done.
More importantly, too, with Festival Light coming up, I know the traffic backs up through there sometimes.
Well, and along with 16th and Grand, 9th and Grand needs to be done. So those two need to be done. I mean, if we don't have anybody to operate the striper that we own, we need to send it out for bid and get it done. So.
Keith, that is something we can do in-house, right, with that striper that we got?
Yeah, the Public Works crew has just been wrapped up in water leaks the last few days, several days, but that needs to be done as well.
I heard the main broke again on 11th Street this afternoon.
Would temperature affect that at all? Like if we don't get it done before it starts getting real cold, does that put it out for the season, or is that something we can do year-round?
I'm going to defer that to Jim as a technical question. I think we can do that pretty late into the season, though. Obviously, extreme temperatures would affect that.
Is that if we can't get it internally, is that something we can go out with state contract, and
We could.
if we have the budget for it?
Yes.
The second thing I had is we talked a couple of months ago about moving the Chickasha Industrial Authority meetings to City Hall and changing the time of it. Has any progress been made on that?
No, I believe we had that conversation in executive session, if I remember right. But no, I haven't had any follow-up. Thank you for reminding me. I have something as well. I did pause the engagement with SGR. I believe that's what their acronym is, the group, the headhunting group for city manager, because we did have a internal well-qualified applicant apply. So I'd like for us to see that to fruition, whether we hire them or not, and then we can always re-engage, but have a chance to, one, give our staff a chance to apply, and two, save ourselves some money if it's not necessary. So we can always just hit the start button again and go back out and engage them again if we need to.
Agreed. So will we go ahead and plan an executive session to discuss that, or?
Correct. Tentatively, we are right after, we have that meeting Monday. I'm thinking of doing it right at the same time we're all going to be here. Let's roll right into that. It'll be executive session to go over the resume, which I believe was emailed to everybody.
I got it.
And we can have a chance to talk with Jim too if we see the need to. Which obviously there'll probably be a need to. But yes, Kelly, we were going to discuss that in length, yes.
Great.
So I had something. I just wanted to commend everyone that came out for the homecoming parade. You could hardly get down the street with the trailers and the floats with the kids on them for how many people were packed in there. I just love to see it. Even when, our teams aren't winning much, we're still showing support for the school and for the team, and I just love that aspect of our community. And then on a little high note, because it's been really difficult to be a football fan in these parts, college and high school, our 7th grade just beat Blanchard 46-0. That's exciting. Go Chicks.
You said 46 to nothing?
46-0.
It's embarrassing.
Whooped them.
I've been on that receiving end before. It's not fun.
Yeah.
Anybody got anything else? All right, we'll move on to item 4, consent docket.
Move we accept the consent docket as presented.
Second?
I'd like to remove item 4C for discussion.
4C. You said 4C is in Charlie, correct?
Yes, yep.
I will need an amended motion.
Move we approve the consent docket, removing item 4C.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Nelson,
Yes.
Ginn. Yes. Hebblethwaite,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Alexander,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Curtis,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes.
Grayson.
Yes. Item 5. 4C, accept the 2025 SAFE Grant Award for the Police Department.
Chief, I just wanted to confirm, it talks about flock cameras. Sorry, I'll wait till you. I just wanted to confirm that it talks about flock safety cameras, and then it says the grant will not pay for it, but it says a budget modification request to the original application has been approved. That didn't add the flock cameras, right?
The original application did have that request,
Okay,
but that request has not been funded. Not because the AG's office said no to that request, but because the amount of money that was allocated to the city police department, I had to go back in and remodify my request to match the funds that were provided.
okay,
So that's why I removed the request for flock cameras.
okay. Just had some concerns with the flock cameras themselves.
It's not going to happen this year.
Okay.
Do we already have some of those type of cameras, Chief?
We do not have anything like flock cameras, no, sir.
Okay, but there's an intent to get some?
I have every intent to get them, yes, sir.
Okay. I think council should look at that very closely on behalf of what most citizens would tolerate as far as their civil liberties.
Well, any grant application award would have to come through council for acceptance.
Okay.
Anybody? Anything else? Thank you, Chief. I still need a motion on that.
Make a motion that the council accepts the 2025 SAFE Grant Award and authorize the city manager to execute the same.
Second.
Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Ginn. Yes. Hebblethwaite,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Alexander,
Yes.
Burris,
No.
Curtis,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Grayson.
Yes. Item 6A, public hearing to discuss and consider the preliminary plat for Enclave Estates at Chickasha for applicant Crafton Toll. It is 6:40. I'd like to go ahead and open the public hearing. you have something to present.
Good afternoon. I'm Ken Dillon with Craft and Toll, 300 Parkway Boulevard in Yukon. Here to represent the applicant, who's also with me. But this is a tract that's 16.73 acres. It's currently zoned R1. So what you see before you is a preliminary plat that contains 74 total lots, yields a density of a little over 4 dwelling units per acre. All of the lots conform obviously to the zoning. The subdivision or the preliminary plat conforms completely to your subdivision regulations. It's, you know, again, we're taking access from Mississippi and 34, so it's kind of to finish out older development that was already started. So if you look at it in some manners, it's kind of an infill parcel. So you got utilities there. This site sits within a couple of miles of, I think, most of your schools, a couple of miles from the fire station. So it's a great opportunity to develop a tract of land that's sat there for a while. And so we're excited about the project and be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Can you tell me about, I think what's proposed in the north and west corner may be listed as common area. Would that by chance be a park?
I think we may have a little amenity area there, but that's predominantly a detention facility.
For the water?
Yeah, to detain water, to meet your
surface
drainage
water.
ordinance. Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Would it have any kind of like trail access or anything around it for the residents?
Yeah, I think we're going to have some amenities up front. We're trying to figure out exactly which lot that's going to be on. But yes, I think in the future we will have an amenity area next to that pond or that greenbelt area.
Well, it's certainly needed to drive to that area of the community right now, and for the past several years. Mm-hmm. It's been dodging quite a bit of street parking and a lot of child's play just to get there. And I can't imagine what perhaps 70 plus more residences needing to get in and out of their new addition. What kind of traffic that, I believe it is that 33rd that they would come off of Grand to get to Mississippi?
So 29th Street's over here, Grand's up here. Our access is from Mississippi and 34th. This is a kind of a primary access on 34th that goes all the way up to Grand. There's another entrance that comes out the 29th, so that gives you the circulation within the neighborhood.
I'd say the
go ahead.
I think the 29th is pretty slow that way with those kind of struggles with the street parking at all times of the day, and then a lot of kids playing in the street. I guess there's no place to go out there for what's already there. So that's a concern. I guess while I'm going with it, I like the idea of fulfilling a need in our community, but I'm also concerned about what have we studied or what do we know about the services to add that many lines to Chickasha water and then to sanitary sewer, which if it involves the one that's probably south of Grand on 29th Street, it seems like that one's in trouble quite often. So I'm concerned, have we studied that at any level, Rachel?
We work with Public Works in the development process. It's already in the budget planning to work on that 29th Street lift station in preparation for this development and the other development that's already going in there. So we are already planning to facilitate the homes since we have kind of a big housing need in our community.
And 74 lots is, I wouldn't say that it doesn't have, it obviously has some impact on that infrastructure, but 74 lots is not a lot of lots as far as water and sewer capacity from an engineering calculation. But like I say, it does go to an existing lift station that kind of sets up there on 29th, so I think the city, again, our contribution to it is very minimal when you look at the entire basin, but nonetheless, again, it conforms to the zoning, conforms to subdivision regulations, and certainly, like I say, we feel like if you look at your community and, hey, where are we going to put the housing and where should things go? Obviously, everything next to the infrastructure that's in place, and again, it's an opportunity to develop what has been there as a, quote, infill parcel for some time, so.
And it also conforms with our flood mitigation plan too, I noticed.
Yes, sir.
so that's.
Yes, we've already submitted, even with the preliminary plat, a preliminary drainage report that shows that we can easily meet all the drainage ordinances criteria. So we've already provided that. And again, this is the general plat, so the next, if we're successful tonight, then the next phase would be as we come back in with the final plat and the full construction plans to where we look specifically at the infrastructure, the water, the sewer, and those sort of things. So there'll be a lot more engineering calculations to come if we're successful tonight with the preliminary.
These more of a medium-priced home, or where are we at as far as?
I would say, yeah, I would say that, maybe a tad bit lower to medium size or pricing, that neighborhood.
Is there a certain size that you're aiming to, like square footage per?
There'll be a minimum of 1,300, I think, in the covenants. Yes, ma'am. So, but again, I mean, it's, you know, not to beat a dead horse, but just to keep in mind, it's already zoned R1, and we conform to your subdivision regulations. Planning Commission recommended approval unanimously, so we're in compliance with all the rules and regulations, so.
How would appeal for more common space go with ownership? Is that something that at this process tonight could be considered in the future?
Our subdivision regulations kind of speak to that, Mr. Burris, that we've worked with the Parks Department when we wrote those regulations. We're trying not to add too much more park space because in the 50-year time frame or the 100-year time frame, when an HOA or development group goes away, that park defaults to the city's responsibility when they add common spaces in subdivisions like that. And so, you know, we have some other impact fees that we incorporate to give money back to the Parks Department, or sometimes developers will donate something to a current park that we have to kind of impact that green space and encourage families to use the parks that we have. Because long-term, it becomes a maintenance cost for us if we keep adding small pocket parks in all the subdivisions.
So the city has a concern about maybe an additional one there, or the type that it would be?
That was something that was called out in the subdivision regulations, that's kind of how we regulated that, yes, sir. So it's not that they're not allowed, but it would have to be approved prior to.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think, and Rachel can correct me, but I think your subregs even want even a neighborhood park to service about 250 homes, or you know, it's a couple thousand, 2,400 population. So obviously with 16.7 acres, it's a real small project. You know, so really, again, every bit of maintenance, a common area and everything else costs money. And so it's one thing if you've got an acre park that's got, you know, 300 homes, but it's another thing if you've got, you know, a small 16.7 acre subdivision with 74 homes trying to maintain a large common area. So I think we will have some amenities in that northwest corner, but our intent is to keep it a little bit on the smaller side just for the overall maintenance, because the maintenance of that park will just be exclusively for the owners in this neighborhood. We can't require anybody else to pay into the HOA or anything else. So.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, I'd like to go ahead and close the public hearing at 6:48. Move on to 6B, discussion, consideration of possible action to approve the preliminary plat for Enclave Estates at Chickasha for the applicant Crafton Toll.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Hebblethwaite,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Alexander,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Curtis,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Ginn. Yes. Grayson.
Yes. Item 6C, discussion, consideration, of possible action to approve resolution number 2024-28R. Where am I at? A resolution creating, naming, and establishing the commencement date for the increment district number 2, City of Chickasha, ratifying and affirming ordinance number 2024-05 of the City Council and of the City of Chickasha, Oklahoma, providing a serviceability and containing other provisions related hereto.
Make a motion that we approve resolution number 2024-28R as presented.
Second.
Discussion.
So is this just the downtown Right, number 2,
Yes.
Yes, sir.
not, okay.
And I believe this just starts the date, it commences the TIF, doesn't,
Not naming it?
Well, the date is, what, January?
January 1st, 25?
yes. Yep. So we can start getting that baseline, and then possibly any increment increase we start collecting into that pot to be able to fulfill infrastructure needs, or if a potential developer comes, we have something in the pot ready to go.
So how does that work with the assessing? I think the assessing doesn't happen until next spring,
So it'd be assessed on current.
on current.
Yeah, so the baseline would be established, and Nate could speak on this further, but I believe if we commence it, starting January, anything before January is the baseline. So that continues to go like normal to wherever. Then anything after the commencement date, if there is any increment increase, that'll be captured. Now, also, we've got to keep in mind, if one part of the TIF declines, the other one goes up, and there's a net zero, there's nothing captured. You know, we're not taking from anything if there's nothing to take. I said take's a horrible word. There's nothing to capture. I guess that's a horrible word too. There's nothing to get in the pot.
To disperse.
To disperse, there we go.
I don't think you can find a good word.
Yeah, you can't really find a good word, you're right.
Well, I was just wondering, because when do you, if you're going on current assessment, then when does the Grady County assessor actually start again, after April next year? Actually, for the property, do you know what I'm speaking to, Nate?
Every assessor does things just a little bit differently, but if you establish with an effective date of January 1, then the date that the valuation for the baseline should be calculated is the value as of January 1. How they do that, that may or may not include whatever increase that they might bump up for, 3% or 5%. Between 23 values and 24 values, they would not necessarily have to establish that date or establish that value on April 1, or on January 1. So, I mean, they could have some time to go in, and they'll need some time, quite frankly, to go in and make that calculation. And so, they can do that and determine that. They would need to know that. I mean, we'd really need to know that by the end of the year, quite frankly, so.
On remodels and stuff like that, I think they have to wait a year after
Yeah,
that
so
remodel's done to.
again, so if somebody's in the process of remodeling and they haven't finished by January 1, then that increase in valuation isn't going to get
Until the
picked up
next
as
year.
part of the baseline. But if they finish it before the end of the year, end of this year, then it would be picked up and it would be part of the baseline.
Okay.
So again, I'm sure there'll be a mix of both.
So
with those
any
things.
projects that are already completed would be included in the baseline.
Yes.
Okay.
So how do you personally see above the baseline being accrued? Like, how does ad valorem increase in a section of town that's, all the structures are already built?
Well, so I mean, effectively, you're not going to have any ad valorem collections. You shouldn't have any for 2024. For 2025, because if the baseline is established based on the January 1 value, every year when you establish the value, your value of your home, when you get your, you might not get that letter until like July, but it's technically the value of it as of January 1 of that year. So if the baseline is established as of January 1, 2025, there should not be any increment, because there will not be any increase that's assessed until January 1 of 2026. So things that happen during the year 25 get picked up at the beginning of 2026, and so then in 2026, now, if in the aggregate the total value is higher than the baseline, there will be an increment, and there will be an amount of tax that gets collected based on that increment. So those would be TIF revenues that would be paid by the taxpayer at the end of 26, early 27, depending on if they pay it all or pay half and half. And so it would be spring to early summer, so May, June probably of 27, when the city would actually receive would receive incremental ad valorem revenues from the TIF district based on a January 1, 2025 start date. Somebody finishes something January 2, 2025, it gets assessed January 1, 2026, they pay taxes at the end of 26, and the city gets TIF revenues in mid-year 2027. So again, that's why you've got that lag in time. The difference for the city is any sales tax that might be generated that's an above and beyond what the baseline is. And the city will do a similar calculation for the baseline of the sales tax and the hotel tax. And so they can establish those based on what the collections were for calendar year 2024. So again, there'll be a month or two once all those revenues have been realized and the information's available for tax commission. So the city may not actually establish that number firmly until maybe March or April of next spring, but then they can go in and they can calculate, and then based on the collections that start coming in March, a check from March would represent collections in January, and if it's ultimately determined that there is some increment at that point, that probably isn't.
Right, but what my question is how do you increase above the base rate in an area of town that's already built up? How do you see that increasing?
Okay. Yeah,
so you have anything to
you
capture.
will have yes, you will have to have investment made that's going to cause the property value to elevate.
I mean, right out the gate with the completion of Savoy, it should drive ad valorem up in that section down there for, as far as the assessor goes, because now you have basically a brand new building down there that's going to get assessed as such. So will they go in and assess everybody down there on 1 January, or are they going to wait until the following year to reassess? Because it'd be better off for the city if they waited for the following year to assess and go ahead and assess the Savoy as it is.
Well, again, that'll be dependent on every building whether or not they've made an improvement. I mean, I think the county assessor I think they're required by law to do a visual inspection every 4 years, but then obviously when you have improvements that are going on, then those are done at the time they are. So if projects get finished before the end of the year, they'll be part of the base. If they're after, then whatever the net increase is will be part of the TIF district. So,
I mean, they have the ability to do a standard 3% increase, and that will happen because of development that just got completed. That's why I was wondering if they'll wait until after January 1, come around in 2026, or if they'll use the old
my anticipation is, because if the effective date is January 1 of 25, the baseline should take into account if there was a 3% increase on property generally during 2024, that should be part of the baseline. Again, I'll leave that to the assessor to make that determination, whether I don't know if they apply that uniformly all the time. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, so.
But there's a decent amount of property just in think of the Mid-First building. There's been talks for several years about turning, and remodeling that. They do that. Property value of that goes up, so there's
a lot
there's ad valorem opportunity in this TIF district.
Because you have a lot of commercial buildings, you've got business personal property, and so a lot of that is being depreciated on an annual basis too. So you've constantly got some component of the baseline that's decreasing in value. Again, the baseline gets fixed, so if you've got this personal property that's coming down, you've still got to make that up from somewhere else too. So, and if they
where would that be? That's a great point. Where would you make it up at?
Well, it'll be, again, the TIF is looking at the aggregate increase. So again, there's all sorts of things. There are things that are naturally trending up. There are other, like appreciation on real property year over year. There's things that are trending down, like depreciation on personal property. There's a baseline that gets fixed in time, and then you're going to look at the total value. And so if you have investment you're gonna have something significantly above what that baseline value is. If you don't have capital investment, you may or may not end up with a value that's higher than your baseline, and only if you have a total value that's higher than your baseline do you have any TIF revenues.
Would it ever be a thing where you don't see any real increases and it kind of drives the situation where you got to go out for TIF bonds or something like that, of that nature, to actually stimulate the or give some kind of incentive for a developer? Or
I mean,
do have that
that's
wrong?
something you could potentially do if the situation was right. Typically, you would look at a particular development proposal, how much revenue are they going to generate? And, if we anticipate, okay, all of this new revenue is going to be TIF revenue, then there might be the ability to monetize that revenue stream through some sort of borrowing. So again, that's...
But to bond it, we'd have to show a revenue stream, right? You can't just take out bonds based on.
Yeah, to get a lender to loan you the money, whether it's a bondholder or a bank, you're going to have to be able to demonstrate, and they're probably going to look through to, all right, what is the business? Do they actually have the ability to do what they say they're going to do in a development agreement that would come before the city at a later date? And so, yeah, again, it's a hypothetical right now, but at that point in time, then it would be a real proposal that could be evaluated on its merits.
So when we start this timeline, we're basically starting the timeline going, say we start in January 2025, and then we have to actually go through the process for a period of maybe 1 or 2 years before we actually see any increases, and then what happens after that?
Well, for ad valorem, we know there will be a timeline before we see anything just because of that lag. If a new business opens and generates net increase in sales tax, that's only a 2-month lag from the time collections are made to city. So, I mean, if there's a retail increase there, that you might see the sales tax revenue in a very short order of time, whereas the ad valorem is not going to follow for another 1.5 years or 2 years potentially.
And that sales tax revenue is potentially what we could leverage for the matching state funds,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
I have a crazy question that just popped in my head. Food truck championship. If we're holding the food truck championship in downtown Chickasha, they're paying sales tax. If we have an increase in their sales tax that helps bump it up, will that sales tax be captured for the TIF? Even though it's not real property down there, but it's sales tax generated in the TIF district.
Should I know the chamber, one of their requirements is that you have to submit your sales tax permit, and I believe there's a way through the state where they can tie it. Like for an event, you create an event with the state Oklahoma Tax Commission, and then they send it to the vendor, and you have to remit taxes based on that event.
Right.
Now,
Would it be
as long as the chamber is doing what they're supposed to do, it should.
So would it be zip code coded somehow, or have you ever ran into that? I mean, it sounds like a mess.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're, I'm not an expert in this area.
Right.
If they've got a brick and mortar location, then their sales tax permit is going to be tied to there. And if they've got a truck that goes around, it's probably all going to get tied back to that brick and mortar location.
Okay.
And if that happens to be inside a TIF, then it might generate TIF revenue. And if it's not, then it won't.
Okay.
Over time, I would think that the precision to where they identify the origination of taxes is going to continue to become more accurate. I mean, we've seen that a lot of times with the use tax and Amazon, and things are done at point of delivery. I think there's probably a technology. Honestly, I think the technology is viable at this point, but the implementation of it isn't there yet. But, a decade from now, who knows?
I guess,
Brian, when we were heavily running the food truck, we actually had to remit tax per the municipality we were in.
okay.
Yeah.
But because the TIF's not the whole municipality, right? So
Right.
would you
That I'm not sure.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I'm not
But if
sure.
it's tied back to the license that the chamber gets, I think is what Zach was meaning, that then it should,
Well, that would be the event.
Theoretically.
The event address, yes.
right, which would be in the TIF district.
And one of the things, I'm not advocating you do this right now, but one of the things that the city can consider is, you can look at adopting some policies for how do we do this? I mean, some of the more basic questions are, what happens if you've got an existing business and they open another location that happens to be in the TIF district? Well, if it's the same owner, they're going to have a single sales tax permit. So when the city gets the information, they're just going to get $1 amount. They can't tell how much is here versus there. And so, an example of how you deal with that is, okay, how much historically did they generate when they had one location? How much are they now generating now that they have two locations? And you can look at that as an increment on a, kind of a case-by-case basis. These are the rules that we apply. We make assumptions to how we're going to treat that when we get those raw numbers, how we're going to determine what's TIF and what's not TIF when we can't necessarily tell exactly what side of the line it was on to begin with.
I'm really not fond of this direction or method and a few other things that the city's done. But is there a thought process that if flood mitigation actually does happen in this area, wouldn't one expect that values would start increasing upon the completion of those successful measures, if they can be successful? That could happen within the 25-year period. If that were to happen, that there would be a boost.
Absolutely, because if you do the flood mitigation, you're almost automatically decreasing the cost of development.
The assessor will notice values, investment will notice
That will
less problems in investing in that area for refurbishing and whatnot.
I believe so.
So amendments to the TIF, can you do that? Can we add or do amendments after we start the clock?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can amend the TIF ordinance at any point in time that the city wanted to bring an amendment forward. And again, the rules are, if you are not increasing the total authorized project costs by more than 5% of what was originally authorized, not increasing the size of the TIF district by more than 5% of what was originally authorized, or not substantially changing the characteristic of the TIF district. And that means, all right, instead of downtown, we're gonna tear down all of downtown and do an industrial development. Okay. I mean, that would be a significant change in character. Those can be done by minor amendment. The city can adopt that by simple majority. Anything beyond that minor amendment category or exception would require the city to go through the full process. So it would convene the review committee. Review committee would make a recommendation. Planning commission would make a recommendation. You'd have your two public hearings, and then the city could consider adoption of that amending ordinance.
I guess this question might be for Keith, but like she mentioned the Mid-First Bank building. I don't believe our infrastructure can support that now, right? Do we have the money to jumpstart the infrastructure?
Well, in our annual budgeting process, we do set aside money for specific projects. But yeah, you're right. We do not currently have the water pressure to adequately support some of the larger buildings downtown. And that's why we're building a water treatment plant. Why we're trying to improve infrastructure in other parts of town too. But yeah, that's all connected.
Okay.
But starting this timeline and starting that pot collecting could potentially have revenue to start some infrastructure projects that are needed utilizing that capture.
Right. This would begin to set aside money for those projects that are necessary for economic development.
Because it doesn't have to be used for developer enticement.
No.
It could be used by us to do actual infrastructure improvements.
Absolutely.
I just think the developer is not going to come in without infrastructure. So that was, I'm just concerned on where does it start? Like, how do we start this? Because we don't have the money for the infrastructure, but we need the infrastructure for the developers. We need developers to bring money. to get the money for the infrastructure. So how do we start, I guess?
This is the mechanism to start that process of capturing revenues and using the state's Leverage Act as we're creating employment in the impacted area.
So that sounds like a project plan then. Like, so we need to start the clock so we can capture revenues to do infrastructure to attract a developer.
That's fair.
Is that
Yeah.
Is that right? Because the whole time I've been reading this, it talks about a project plan, but there's not one attached. It wasn't when we voted on the TIF originally.
The project plan was adopted as part of the ordinance. So that project plan document that was the subject of the review committee and all the recommendations of the public hearing. Yeah, so that document was adopted formally by the ordinance. So this resolution is just referring back to that ordinance and that specific project plan.
But in that plan, there wasn't a 1 through 10 step plan of how do we get a developer into this district.
No, nothing specific to a specific project. Again, this was not a TIF that was created to lure a particular project to a specific location for a specific purpose. This is more general redevelopment, so it sets up this framework. So, I mean, the kind of as a separate process of the TIF, you've got whatever recruitment efforts you have to work with specific development projects. The TIF gives you a tool to, one, potentially offer some form of incentives, whether they're direct incentives that we think of or more indirect incentives like necessary infrastructure improvements. But you would have a development agreement that would be brought forward. They're agreeing to build A, B, and C. And in order to support that, the city is going to commit to do projects 1, 2, and 3. And, and then there will need to be some level of agreement of how does the city pay for 1, 2, 3, understanding that there is no money from A, B, and C until 1, 2, and 3 get done, A, B, and C gets built and spins off revenue. And so that could look like the city committing funds in its capital budget to make specific projects. The city could look at borrowing funds, whether secured by TIF revenues or by other sources, or it might look like the developer being willing to commit the funds to those infrastructure costs, understanding that they will get their money back for those infrastructure costs that get put back through TIF revenues in the future. So again, a number of different tools, and the project plan is written to allow for any of those as the city deems as appropriate in any specific circumstance.
But in lieu of having a developer dangling any projects in front of us, it seems to me this public works infrastructure cost estimate is our city project plan of what we could do in lieu of a developer to start hopefully making infrastructure improvements downtown, like Brian was talking about. So we do have a plan for those funds if no developer shows up or we deem a project that's put in front of us not worthy of the TIF money. We can still utilize that money and do infrastructure projects. And we've already identified 600 or 500, don't get me saying numbers wrong again, $560 million worth of infrastructure needs the city currently has that we could put those TIF revenues to use doing.
Let's vote.
Okay. We have a motion to second. Let's do a roll call.
Smith,
Yes.
Burris, or Alexander,
Yes.
Burris,
No.
Gertis,
No.
Boyd,
No.
Nelson,
Yes.
Ginn,
Yes.
Ebblethwaite,
Yes.
Grayson.
Yes. Item 7, motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
We're adjourned. I'd like to call the Chickasha Municipal Authority to order. Need a roll call, please.
Boyd,
Here.
Nelson,
Here.
Ginn,
Here.
Ebblethwaite,
Here.
Smith,
Present.
Alexander,
Here.
Burris,
Here.
Gertis,
Here.
Grayson.
Here. Item 2, consent docket.
Move we accept the consent docket as presented.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Boyd,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Ginn,
Yes.
Hebblethwaite,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Alexander,
Yes.
Burris,
No.
Curtis,
Yes.
Grayson.
Yes. Item 4A, discussion, consideration, and possible action to authorize staff to solicit bids for CMA 2404, city janitorial services.
I move to authorize staff to solicit bids for CMA 2404 city janitorial services.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Nelson,
Yes.
Ginn,
Yes.
Hebblethwaite,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Alexander, Burris,
Yes.
Curtis,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes.
Grayson.
Yes. Item 4B, discussion, consideration, of possible action to award bid CMA 2405, sewage lift station rehabilitation, 23rd Street at Grand Avenue, to Craft Rentals Construction Company in the amount of $73,120.
Make a motion that we award bid CMA 2405 sewage lift station rehabilitation, 23rd Street and Grand Avenue, or excuse me, at Grand Avenue, to Craft Reynolds Construction Company in the amount of $73,120.
Second.
On those intentional, that's a pretty good name for a construction company for rehabilitation of a sewage lift.
Yeah, I think that's where my brain went.
Discussion? Roll call?
Ginn,
Yes.
Hebblethwaite,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Alexander,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Curtis,
Yes.
Boyd,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Grayson.
Yes. Item 5, motion for adjournment.
So moved. Second.
We're adjourned. I'd like to call the Chickasha Municipal Airport Authority to order. Need a roll call, please.
Boyd,
Here.
Nelson,
Here.
Ginn,
Here.
Hebblethwaite,
Here.
Smith, Alexander,
Here.
Burris,
Here.
Curtis,
Here.
Grayson.
Here. Item 2, consent docket.
No move.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Boyd,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes.
Ginn,
Yes.
Hebblethwaite,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Alexander,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Curtis,
Yes.
Grayson.
Yes. Item 4, motion for adjournment.
So moved.
We're adjourned.
Second.
Thank you, everybody. Don't forget about Monday.